What's the dialogue that you would have with the elderly couple that have a two-story? They don't want to list the home. They're hunting houses, but they don't want to list the
Yeah, I
home.
think those are problematic because the probability that they actually find something and move is probably pretty small, unless they have somebody in their life, like a sibling or a child, that's the driving force behind the move. Typically, as we get older, we like change less. And I'm also aware that in the financial environment and climate that we're in, unless they have lots of resources, then wherever they're going to move to is probably going to cost them more money than where they're currently at. I personally wouldn't spend a lot of time in that scenario. Once I'm aware of that scenario, unless there's a driving force, unless there's a health thing that's causing them to have to move into like assisted living, unless there's a family member that's driving the move, very rarely do they actually produce fruit.
That makes sense. Total sense. Yes,
Is that your experience as well?
it is.
So my questions would be around that. Let's say somebody says that to me. I'm like, okay, great. Well, if you don't mind me asking, I've helped a lot of families at this stage in life and with this type of move, and it's not uncommon that they have, like a family member, whether it's a child or, a brother or sister that's kind of helping them with that process. Is there anybody that is help guiding this move and kind of assisting you, or is it just you? Let's say that on the outside chance, like you weren't able to find the specific home that you were looking for, is it an option for you just to stay put and make the best of it? Let's say that we knew that if you made the move, you sold here and bought something, that your actual monthly expenses just due to inflation and the cost of living and, with like even in a condo, these association dues are getting more and more. It would actually be more than where you're currently at. Would that be okay? Knowing that most of them won't work. So I'll still pre-qualify before I just like hand it. So if somebody says that to me, I'm not like, okay, no, I'm still going to ask a lot of questions, but operating under the assumption that it's probably not going to go anywhere. Like 1 out of 10 of these might actually come to fruition, but there has to be somebody driving. There has to be like a driving reason, health or finance or something.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Who else? Everybody's independently wealthy. Is that what we're doing?
How do I dig better?
Yeah, just get curious, like get nosy.
Curious. Okay.
You were taught like being nosy is bad. You think your doctor thinks being nosy is bad?
No, not at
You ever
all.
been questioned? Well, you're a young guy. Anybody who's a little older, over the age of 40 or 50 on this call, you ever been questioned by a doctor? And they ask you like, you think to yourself, you're like, man, that's kind of an outrageous question, no? But like they got to know, and they're not like, that's their job, right? If you sit down with an attorney, they'll be like, yo, you got to tell me everything. Otherwise I can't help you. I think it's more of a belief thing than it is a skill thing. I think most of us, because formal schooling and like just culture has taught us that asking questions is like bad. It's nosy. It's not nice. Like it's impolite. I remember it's so funny because like, my wife, she's Cuban and like, they're like very private. Right. And I remember we were on a trip and I just started asking questions because like, I don't care. And I'm like, how'd you guys like, because her, parents, they met like writing letters to each other. How long were you writing letters? They're like 4 months. I'm like, then what happened? They're like, we got married. I was like, what? And I looked at my wife, Jesus. I'm like, did you know that? She was like, no. So like we had, my point in telling that story is more like we culturally, independent of like our, kind of upbringing or whatever, but just, we learned in school or whatever that like asking questions is like perceived as being nosy, as being like impolite and to be avoided.
Yeah.
So we are hung up around asking questions, right? Versus like logically, hey, my intent, and notice I soften it by saying something like, hey, my intention is, and asking my next question is not to be nosy. Instead, it's simply just to find out if I could, provide you with any more information that could be helpful or useful in some way. So I'm softening the questions. If you find yourself like people saying to you like, well, that's none of your business, or like, why are you asking that? That has to do with your approach in asking questions, because you're probably asking them in like a staccato manner, right? With no like softeners in between. And then the other thing I would do, Gian, is practice like what I would call like the question game. So what the question game would be like is like, let's say I know like the thing I want you to say is like a palm tree, but I can't actually say the word palm tree, and I have to ask questions to get you to say it to me.
Okay.
So I might say something like, well, what's that type of tree that you see in like Florida and California and it's kind of tropical? What do you call that?
A palm tree.
Do you see?
Okay.
But it forces you to think in terms of questions.
Right. Because
we're taught that communication is what? Statements. But it causes you to think in terms of questions. To get people to tell you versus you, telling them. They'll always argue with your information. They'll never argue with their own. All right, so let's practice. So let's say you want me to say the word apple. Ask me questions to get me to say it.
What's something that's a fruit? It's round and it's the color red.
An apple. Good job, young man.
Okay.
All right, now let's make it a little bit more complicated, like swimming.
What's something that you wear?
Hey,
Damn
notice what is happening. You see what's happening, guys?
Yeah.
Your brain has to switch the way that it's like kind of processing.
Right.
Now I have to think in terms of questions. And it doesn't have to be like singularly. You could ask multiple questions. So it's like, well, like there's different activities that you can do outdoors, and there's some that you can do in the water. And this particular activity has different strokes, like the backstroke and the breaststroke. Like, what is that called?
Swimming.
So it's just learning how to think in terms of questions.
Right.
And again, the underlying thing is the belief. I think a lot of you guys think it's being nosy or bad, so you don't do it. I view it as it's my job. It's my job to know. So I don't feel any way about asking.